G'day ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Draw with Jazza. I'm Jazza and this is the first ever Let's Animate. So I've done Let's Draws before where I take suggestions from the Twitch chat and draw a picture. Today I'm going to animate something and it's going to be very difficult to do because animation is time consuming, but I'm going to get it done in the space of an hour or so. So let's take some requests. Opening up to the Twitch chat and the Flash. That'd be cool because he could be like running or something. Deadpool, T-Rex, Voldemort. Why not? Voldemort. Sweeney Todd. Sweeney Todd could be interesting because if it was a loop, you could have him like cutting people's heads and just have the next person come along, cut a head, and then just have a cycle. It'd be kind of funny. Pokemon Battle could be kind of funny if they just sort of like throw stupid crap at each other. Pokemon Battle. So the suggestions have been taken down. We have 6 different options here, and whichever one is going to win at the end of all this, I might do another poll to see what I'll be animating, and I'll do something that will loop, and we have a very short period of time to animate something interesting and funny and whatever, based on the suggestions. So the winner of the votes is Deadpool, so I'm going to be animating Deadpool, but what will I animate Deadpool doing? Sexy yoga. That's good. What else do we have? Pokemon Battle. There's a few people saying have in a Pokemon Battle. Pooping. Deadpool pooping. Juggling. Riding a T-Rex. Riding a T-Rex on unicycle. Alright, so the votes are being tallied. The winner by far is Pokemon Battle, it seems. So I'm going to be animating Deadpool involved in a Pokemon Battle. So an image is in my head. I think I know how I want to do this, and I picture it a little something like this. So I'm going to have Deadpool in the middle of a field or whatever. He'll be sort of crouched in a squatting position, and he'll be sort of like watching with intensity this Pokemon battle. So there'll be like 2 little Pokemons, probably like a Pikachu and a Bulbasaur or something like that. And I think if they like back and forth and attack, and Deadpool like reacts like super like to each one, like turns left and right, it's like, ah, you know what I mean, every time, and they'll be like really lame attacks, like they like, you know, do little crappy attacks. I think that's something, because then that loops, and then we have some animations. So we have Pokemon Battle and we have Deadpool. First thing I need to do is rough out the characters' initial poses and proportions and all that stuff. So I'm gonna go forward and do that, and then I'm gonna start creating the elements of the character by drawing this solid line work, coloring them in, and drawing them in separate clips and parts so that I can then tween and work and animate them in the scene. So I've laid down the foundation that I'm going to use to animate now. It looks fairly simple. It looks like I've basically drawn just 3 characters, which I have, but I've drawn them in a different sort of way. I've broken them all up into bits. So if I go into the Deadpool clip here, you can see all of his parts are separatable, and they each have different anchor points. So when I select a different limb, you'll see that this arm has a little dot here up at the armpit shoulder area, which means that when I rotate, it rotates around that as the pivot point. So all of them have pivot points placed in a place that makes the most sense. The torso is kind of lower on the body, the legs kind of anchored to the crotch. And now I'm ready to animate. So to animate it and keep it not very time consuming, because we're going to do it all in tween animation, I'm going to lay down basic keyframe poses that we can add tweens between, and then we can refine that later on. So what I want to do is have Deadpool sort of bouncing in anticipation, facing one way, and then lurching to the other way and bouncing in anticipation. And I'm going to have him looping between those. So the first thing I need to do is create the first bounce of anticipation section. So before I get to breaking down all of the individual little motions, I want to break it down into sections. So this first section, bouncing in anticipation, I'm going to create new keyframes on all of these layers at frame 70, and I'm going to drag out the animation to 80. And this span of 10 frames is going to be where he turns around. So I'm going to create a pose on frame 80. So I'm going to flip only the things that need to be flipped. Select the torso, flip. Select the head, flip. And I'm also going to adjust the pose. So I'm going to have him leaning forward like this and move the limbs into a place that makes sense. And I don't want it to be exactly the same as the pose that he's got when he's on the other side. So for example, I might raise this back arm up more, just so it looks like he's going into a different position rather than the same position facing the other way. So now I can sort of flick between these two frames, and you can see that this is the motion that he's going to take. And then he's going to bounce in this section. Now we don't want it too symmetrical. So if we have 70 frames, then swap, then 70 frames, it'll feel a bit too symmetrical. So I'm actually going to break down this next section into 2 loads of bounces. So I'll have one section that goes for maybe 30 frames, and then with another keyframe, I'll alter the pose and make that go for maybe another 40 or 50. So now I need to decide what the second pose is going to be. I'll maybe have him crouch back a little bit more to add some intensity to this pose. Decent, so I'm going to raise his arms a bit, maybe an expression of frustration or something. So he'll bounce there, then he'll sort of bounce back a little bit, just creating some interest. It's all a bit of a tweaking process at first, but you'll notice I'm not jumping straight into animation. I'm just breaking down the solid chunks of areas where there will be movement. So the movement is mostly going to be in this position, then he'll transition and have another transition. Maybe have his head facing a little bit more like, what are you doing? And then finally, he'll transition back into his first pose. So I'm going to create a new keyframe on 150 for all of those frames. And then I'm going to select my very first keyframes and put it back here at 160. So then when I hit enter, that's the duration of the clip. He turns around, he's bouncing here, he makes an expression, and then he turns back. So to create the bounce effect, what I'm going to do is create an alternate keyframe for this first section. So somewhere here around frame 10 or whatever, I'm going to have his body in a slightly different position. And what this means is he's going to be bouncing between these two positions. So we're going to add the height of the bounce to the frame in between them. And you can see that he's sort of just going back and forward. Now we need to add some height to the bounce. So here in the middle, I'll click and drag, add a new keyframe, and same thing for this section. Click and drag, add a new keyframe. And I'm just going to go to these middle sections and pull everything up and have the legs sort of go up as well with the bounce, but the knees don't really need to move that much. I'm actually really happy with how this is looking, and I actually don't want to add too much to this. I do need some easing though, just makes it feel a little more smooth. I'm happy with that. I'm going to copy all of these frames and paste them in here, and do that again, paste them in here. And this last one, I'm going to have ease out on 100. So I have a little trick here that I'm going to use when making a turn section when he faces the other way completely. We don't need to draw middle frames if we're just doing tweens and we want to just really fake it. What we can actually do is draw the midpoint frame as close to a midpoint as we can using a keyframe, and just kind of have quite a lot of movement here. And then I'm going to duplicate the position he's going to land into and place it on the very next keyframe, copying it and putting it directly next to it. And then I'm going to turn on my onion skin, and showing one frame previous, I'm going to drag everything into a position as close as possible to what I've dragged everything into there. And we're trying to trick the viewer's eye into thinking that no weird transformations are taking place, or that we're not just flipping things and then quickly moving them. But what's actually going to happen is in the height of the apex, he's going to quickly flip and then land into his next bounce position. To make this motion look as believable as possible, we want to make it as extreme as possible. So I want to really ease in in this lead in and really ease out in this lead out. So then we have a quick bam, sort of bounce across. And then we can add some extremity to this as well by creating a duplicate keyframe after this landing pose and add some extremity to the landing pose. A bit of a follow through and a bit of a gravity push down to the ground as he lands. So now we're adding some follow through and separating the motion of these things. I'm going to add an ease out to all of this. So this is our little flip over section. And then I'm going to add a couple of bounces here, doing the same thing I did before. All right, that's cool because it's like he's getting impatient. So I'm going to copy all of this, paste all of this right there. So let's watch this. So he's bouncing in anticipation, flips, bouncing in anticipation. And now I need two poses. So the first pose he's going to go into will be an anticipation arch back. And then the last one will be a bounce forward. So for the anticipation arch back, I'm going to bring everything back like this. Bring his arms up like this. Definitely arching back. I think everything needs to go back and the body needs to skew back like this. And then really throwing forward. So I'm gonna have his whole body reaching forward like this, really intense. I'm trying to add as much movement as possible because the problem with tweens is obviously you have less control to make something look more dynamic and more custom. And I need to add bounce. So I'm gonna have this happen rapidly and he'll bounce back into that position. So I'm just going to add a tween to all of this and I'll refine the motion next. And this is a duplicate of the landing position. So I'm just going to essentially add extremity, pull everything forward, everything down. I feel like his arms need to raise up more in anticipation. So I'm really just going to make this much more extreme. And then the final thing we have is this flip into his first position, and we're going from our low crouching position to our middle body up position. So I'm going to have the same thing happen that happened before. We're going to have an allude to that motion by having a midpoint where we bring everything to as much of a central point as possible and copy our final resting frame, add it there to the immediate midpoint frame, and then bring everything with the help of our onion skin to a point just between those two. All right, so now I want to add motion tweens to these, easing in and easing out. We get, hopefully, there we go. So we're starting to, I think that works. This is 165 frames long, so I'm going to drag this out to 165 and render. And then we get a loop. Do something. There are a couple of very small finishing touches I want to make. The first is to animate Magikarp by going in here and just selecting a random selection of frames, maybe 50, and then selecting the tail and the fin and adding a little flap so we can see it sort of do not much. So we have that looping, and then finally we have Metapod, who's going to be even easier to animate because we have his eye. I'll extend this out to, let's say, frame 35, do the same in his eye out to frame 35, and then halfway through I'm just going to select his eyelid and tween it, closing and then reopening. Because then we have this simple blinking Metapod and this simple flappy Magikarp and nothing happening, and Deadpool very anxious in anticipation, and I'm pretty happy with how that looks. We have Deadpool, Magikarp and Metapod sort of doing nothing. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen, this is my Let's Animate result. And the winning vote was Deadpool, and it sort of ended up mixing the two winning votes. So now this is Deadpool facilitating a Pokemon battle. I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. And for those of you who don't know, I've just released an animation course. So if you're interested in making fun stuff like this and developing your own skills, make sure to check out Jazz's Animation Foundation. The link is also on the screen and in the description. It's a very affordable price and it's a very extensive 10-hour plus course. So make sure to check that out. Thank you so much for joining, and until next time, I'll see you later. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe to my channel to see new content every week. Check out more of my stuff by clicking the annotations over there. If you want to support my work and get a few goodies for yourself, head over to my store for archives, ebooks, and get yourself something nice. If you're looking for a great place to collaborate, explore, or share your own content, head over to newgrounds.com. That's it for now, and until next time, see you later.